Hello, welcome to our webinar this morning. This is the Earthquake Country Alliance Pre-K-12 Committee webinar called Key Roles and Responsibilities for Educators After Disasters. My name is Mark Benthien. I'm the Executive Director for Earthquake Country Alliance. I'll be speaking a little bit later. The Earthquake Country Alliance is a statewide organization of many different public, private, and grassroots leaders. We have statewide sector-based committees like our Pre-K-12 committee that develop resources and deliver programs focused on earthquake and tsunami safety and mitigation and preparedness and recovery. We have regional alliances that organize meetings and outreach activities across the state. And we have funding in part from the California Office of Emergency Services that provides support to my home organization at USC's Southern California Earthquake Center, soon to be statewide California Earthquake Center sometime this summer. And if you would like to join us and be on our email list and learn more about our activities and help to deliver them even in your school and community, earthquakecountry.org/join is where you can learn more. All of this is supported by a national program called the National Earthquake Hazards Reduction Program that Cal OES gets funding from FEMA each year, provides that to us to support all these activities, along with some other agencies, federal agencies like the National Science Foundation and U.S. Geological Survey. We coordinate websites at earthquakecountry.org and terremotos.org in Spanish. We support Tsunami Preparedness Week, which happened at the last week of March already this year. Although you can still go to tsunamizone.org to learn about your tsunami hazard if you're near the coast, what to do if you're visiting the coast, and register your activities if you do anything in your organization for tsunami preparedness this whole year. Similar to what we do with earthquakes as part of the ShakeOut, the Great California ShakeOut, which I'll talk about a lot more later on. Most of you, I'm sure, are pretty familiar with it and help to coordinate it, but we have some resources to make sure you are aware of. And then we have, like today's webinar, we have other activities listed at earthquakecountry.org on our calendar section. I mentioned that our committees that we have, this is the different committee, or these are the different committees, including our Pre-K-12 Education Committee, but you can see other sectors, and if you know anybody interested in these sectors, we would welcome them to be with us. You can find out more at earthquakecountry.org/committees. We also have outreach bureaus, and I want to point out one that we do have a speakers bureau or groups that can come to your event with information tables and such. You can go and request those at earthquakecountry.org/events. There's a form there for requesting either a presenter, could be online or in person, or an information table where we come and bring the materials to your activity. Earthquake Country Alliance resources and all of our messaging is centered around the 7 steps to earthquake safety. Learn more at earthquakecountry.org/7steps and in Spanish at terremotos.org/siete pasos. A lot of information and guidance and resources for each of these steps, what to do to secure things, to make your plans, to get your supplies together, to have your financial hardship managed to where you can reduce that, to have maybe retrofitting and having insurance, and even just having your important documents, what to do during the earthquake, both during the shaking and immediately after, and then in the long term, how to reconnect and restore. And we have this information in 16 languages. So this may be appropriate for sending home with your students to their families, and you might even find these useful in language classes as additional materials to read. We have individual pages for each language, as well as you can find all of them at earthquakecountry.org/languages. So if you've just joined, welcome to the ECA Earthquake Country Alliance Pre-K-12 Committee webinar titled Key Roles and Responsibilities for Educators After Disasters. And a quick reminder again, this is a webinar, so we can't see or hear you. Please put questions into the Q&A tool you find on your menu bar. You can also chat with us as needed for assistance, and we will be putting some links into the chat too. And it is being recorded and will be online. Okay, today's agenda, we're going to start with a presentation about a new disaster service worker video from Danielle Chapman with Cal OES. Then we're going to hear about the school's emergency reporting system and other developments and resources from the California Department of Education by Jake Wolf. And then I'm going to talk about Great California ShakeOut and other resources for schools. And we'll wrap up with some final Q&A. Okay, with that, and thank you all again for joining us. We're going to begin with Danielle Chapman, Emergency Services Coordinator with California Governor's Office of Emergency Services. Danielle, you are on.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I've been with Cal OES for about 7 years, and I'm the Emergency Services Coordinator for Planning and Preparedness for Schools, as well as Animals and Disasters. And yeah, I'm here to talk about the disaster service worker video. So the origin, basically, I would say COVID was sort of the catalyst for this idea. Oh, I'm sorry. We can go back to the introduction slide.
This way.
Yeah, no, I go ahead and go to the introduction slide. I appreciate the intro slide. So yes, I sit in the Emergency Functions Planning Unit, and we provide aid to other Cal OES branches, federal and state agencies, as well as local agencies, other stakeholders. For example, with me, since I work in animals, we work a lot with the CARTs, or the California Animal Response Teams. Some other folks that are working really diligently with the animals and disasters, but we also work with school, county, districts, other folks that are working on response and preparedness for schools. Some of the things that we do in the EFPU is State of California Emergency Plan, which one of our senior ESCs has been working really hard on for the last year and a half or so. We work on the California Emergency Support Functions. We support school emergency preparedness, like I said, animals and disasters, and we do some other special projects as well. Next slide. Okay, so the disaster service worker video. The partners that worked on this video with us was, of course, the California Great ShakeOut, the Southern California Earthquake Center, LA Unified School District, the California Department of Education, and of course the Earthquake Country Alliance. Yes, okay, so kind of what I was referring to earlier, the origin or the catalyst, I would say, was COVID-19. A lot of teachers didn't realize that part of their duty is, which is also written in statute, is they are disaster or essential service workers during a declared disaster. And so when teachers were getting calls to come in and work during the pandemic, they were confused and didn't understand why they were being required to do this. So Cal OES and other folks that work in emergency management for schools realized, okay, we need to address this and convey in a quick, efficient way to teachers what this means to them. So, we wanted to, do a quick 3 to 4 minute video, and it's a fantastic way that kind of sums up everything they need to know about what it means to be an essential disaster or disaster service worker. The actual statute, it's written there in the video, some really great resources, some apps that they can download, and ways that they can prepare themselves in their own home. Next slide. Okay, content. So introduces the different types of disasters that have impacted California. So the examples are used like the Camp Fire, the Ridgecrest earthquake, obviously the coronavirus. I'm sure you guys have all experienced some emergency response already this year if you have been affected by the floods. So the video also talks about what teachers' roles are when the disaster strikes. Like I said, the statutes and regulations, what it means to them, and some examples of what those duties look like when they are responding or they are being an essential or disaster service worker. And again, being personally prepared within their household and some resources. Okay, the good part. We're gonna show you the YouTube link to the disaster service worker video, which is on the next slide.
Disaster service workers and essential workers in K-12 schools. This video is sponsored by Earthquake Warning California. In the past 5 years, California has experienced a series of disasters, including earthquakes, wildfires, floods, public safety power shutoffs, and the COVID-19 pandemic. Each one of these events has or have the potential to affect your school and your students. Recent disasters, such as the 2018 Camp Fire in Paradise, the 2019 Ridgecrest earthquakes, and the COVID-19 pandemic, created significant impacts to public schools across the state. In short, disasters happen, and you are often the first people available to take care of your students. So, what do you need to know about your role in protecting yourself and your students? Currently, there are over 500,000 public school employees that serve our nearly 6 million public school students who, by definition, are a dependent population. By law, every one of you is considered a disaster service worker and an essential worker. Disaster service workers, as defined in California Government Code Sections 3100 through 3109, includes all public employees employed by the state or any county, city and county, and state agency or public district. Essential workers, as defined in California Health and Safety Code Sections 131021, are considered primary and secondary school workers, among others, deemed vital to public health and safety by the state public health officer or the director of the Office of Emergency Services. What does all of this mean to you? In the event of a locally or statewide declared disaster or a state of emergency, you may be called upon to assist your schools and districts in responding to a disaster. This may mean that you will be unable to return to your families until your responsibilities as an essential worker or disaster service worker is fulfilled. If at school during a disaster, you may be asked to assist students and other staff members by providing first aid to injured persons or conducting light search and rescue activities. After accounting for all students and staff, you may need to safely evacuate the campus or shelter with your students until they are released back to their families. You may need to work overtime or extended hours depending on the needs of the school or district. You may also be called upon to make and pack school meals for students, relocate classrooms to alternate sites, or assist other schools in your area that are impacted. When something happens at your school site or in your district that requires your presence as an essential worker or disaster services worker, it is important that you and your household are personally prepared. To be prepared, follow these simple steps. Create an emergency plan using the Cal OES Family Readiness Guide. Keep the plan in an easily accessible place in case you need it, and make sure your household knows who your emergency contacts are and how to reach them. Sign up for emergency alerts. Assemble and maintain your home emergency kit of supplies. Check with your school, your district, and your union representatives on specific policies that may apply to you, both as a disaster service worker and an essential worker. Check with your local emergency management agency to determine how your school or district fits into your local emergency operation plan. Go a step further and download the MyShake app. MyShake app is an earthquake warning tool developed by the UC Berkeley Seismology Lab and funded by Cal OES. MyShake detects significant earthquakes quickly, so alerts can notify Californians to take protective action of drop, cover, and hold on when seismic activity is occurring at their location. Download now. It is free. Available in English and Spanish. Get prepared. Get alert. Lastly, take a moment to download your copy of the Cal OES Family Readiness Guide by scanning the QR code on the screen with your smart device. Thank you for being a disaster service worker and an essential worker in California schools.
And that's the video. Thank you guys so much for letting me say a few words regarding the video. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. My contact information, I'll put it in the chat just in case it's not presented later. The link for the YouTube video, it's on our website. If you have any other questions on the different services we provide or what we work on here at Cal OES, again, happy to answer all those questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Danielle. I know you did answer a question in the Q&A by text, but let's go ahead and answer that in case people aren't looking there. So does disaster service worker policies apply to, or do they apply to private school teachers or just public school teachers?
Yes, that is a good question. It is public sector only. The local government would have to swear them in for it to apply, and or they could be considered essential workers depending on their local jurisdiction. Thank you.
And I do see a question that was put into the chat about the recording. It said earlier, you may not have been with us yet. It is being recorded. It will be on the same website that you registered at, on earthquakecountry.org /DSWW, stands for Disaster Service Worker Webinar. It's the short one. I'll put the link here too into that. It will be a few days before that is processed and online, but that's where you can look for it. And again, the email that you got about this webinar has the link there too. Earthquake Country Alert. Days. Okay, so I put that into the chat. Hopefully you can copy or click that link, save that. Okay, any other questions for Danielle? Go ahead and put in the Q&A. We'll be able to come back, but the link to the video and to both links that are shown on the screen right now are also in the chat. And thank you very much again, Danielle.
My pleasure.
So we'll move on. Oh, and here's your contact information, actually. I'll leave this for a moment so people can write it down if they would like to reach out to you. And I know Noelle is also with us on the call, and additional contact information there at Cal OES. And here's that Q&A slide. Oh, and here, look, there's the link that I was talking about. I put these slides together. I should have remembered this coming up. So there's that link, how to join us again on the Earthquake Country Alliance. We do have a survey for today's webinar. It will pop up, or likely at the end, right as the webinar ends. So you can complete it right away. It will not take that long at all, or you can start it now even as we proceed, and I'll put the link to the survey in the chat as well. And then we'll move to our next presentation. And all right. So next up, we have Jake Wolf, Emergency Management Specialist with the California Department of Education. Jake.
Yes, thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to come and share some information with you all today. Earthquakes are very scary. It's a very real threat here in the state of California. Here at the California Department of Education, specifically with the emergency services team, this is a threat that we quite focus on a lot. And we appreciate webinars like this that give us the opportunity to share resources, not only with our partners, but with you. And you are doing a tremendous thing. You may not realize what a big deal it is that you're doing today by focusing in on preparing for a disaster. And just by attending a webinar like this, you can imagine, I see that there's on this webinar, there's 58 participants here today. There's probably likely a whole host more that's going to watch this later. And I just want to congratulate you on taking a step towards being prepared for a disaster, which is really important. Go ahead and go to the next. There you go. All right. So the current emergency services team for the California Department of Education consists of really three people. I think it's important to understand how this kind of came about. You're saying to yourself, I didn't know there was an emergency manager over there at the California Department of Education. Well, there's two of us. I have a manager. His name's Joe Anderson. He is the manager of the emergency services team. And then you see right there above him is Juan. Juan is the director of the schools safety and schools facilities and transportation safety division. It's a mouthful at the California Department of Education, and really focuses on safety for students in schools and on buses. And so we take pride ourselves in taking a really high focus on safety. And in our realm, Joe and I, is really focused on emergency management, which management of an emergency can be really difficult. But if you know what that is and you listen to what we're going to talk about today, you'll have a little bit better idea. So we hope to cover that today. We started in 2020 formally as the emergency services team with two permanent positions. That's Joe and I. And then we're charged with building our department's internal capacity for responding to emergencies. And of course, interagency coordination. That's we work with other state agencies and we work with Cal OES. And we build capacity with the local education agencies in the four phases of emergency management, which are mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. And that's kind of our focus. And then next, I want to talk to you about a few statistics. And so in the state of California, I'm sure that everybody, if you were able to shout out, hey, I'm sure if I were to say, hey, shout out, hey, if you've experienced an earthquake, I think the vast majority of the people on this webinar have experienced an earthquake at some time. California experiences more than 10,000 earthquakes a year. That's from the U.S. Geological Survey. And over 500 are greater than 3.0 magnitude. That means that they're enough that you get to feel them if you're close enough to them. That's a pretty substantial amount of shaking that happens in the state of California. So you would imagine that your risk to experiencing an earthquake is pretty high. And so I would be certainly thinking about what kind of things can I do to prepare, and when they happen, what can I do to respond? The two most earthquake-prone areas in the state of California are San Andreas Fault and the Hayward Fault. San Andreas running along Southern California up to Northern California, and then the Hayward Fault being in the Bay Area. There's also a Cascadia subduction zone, which is in the northwest corner of the state of California and extends into Oregon and Washington. So that being said, California very specifically has a lot of threat. And we're going to go into that on this slide and talk about approximately 1.4 million students attend schools within 2 miles of a major fault. And this is kind of old data. I mean, this is from roughly about 2 years ago when the last time that this data was was analyzed in this way. So you got to think that number probably has gone up, but 2 miles. And if you look at the map that's on the screen, you see that image there. That tells you those lines tell you that those are the most heavily populated areas in the state of California. So we built the highest density population on the most earthquake-prone areas, specifically Los Angeles, right? And so Southern California is, and you see the colors there, and you can see that the probability, right, of a magnitude 6.7 or greater in the next 30 years. And so, of course, the bluer the color, the more likely it's going to happen, and the redder the color, the least likely.
Jake, by the way, you have that the other way around.
Oh, sorry. Or less. Thank you. Appreciate you clearing me up on that. So recognizing that, really at the end of the day, what it's about is the population density in our state is built really closely to faults. And so understanding that, we need to be very careful with how we build, how we prepare, how we get ready to respond. And when we do respond, understanding the amount of response that's going to be required in order to support what the aftermath of an earthquake would be. And more than 7,000 schools are located in areas of high seismic risk. And for us in the state of California, we consider schools as what's called critical infrastructure. Schools are very important to the functioning of our society. When bad things happen and services are interrupted, we as a government, we want to get schools as open as soon as possible. They do a lot of things for the community. There's things like food, right? Some schools sometimes serve up to 3 meals a day. Additionally, they provide different services with the advancement in community schools. Now schools are open many hours throughout the day, providing things like health services, mental health services, support services for parents, and then after school programs and preschool programs to support youth both before and after school. So knowing that society is really tied into the infrastructure that schools bring, and that's why we consider them critical infrastructure. And that's why employees that work at public schools are considered essential workers. So very important that we continue to support schools in doing that, doing preparedness. And to support that, we have a thing called the Education Code. I'm sure that you all have heard about that. We have an Education Code, and it talks about preparing. We have this thing called a comprehensive school safety plan. A comprehensive school safety plan identifies certain safety tactics and procedures that have been pre-developed within a K-12 education agency to be able to provide a safe environment for learning. California Education Codes sections 32282, 35295 through 35297 identify the components that are in that comprehensive school safety plan. And required under the comprehensive school safety plan is mandatory annual earthquake drills and instruction. That's why this organization that we're partnering with today is so important, and continuing to train your personnel and to support continuity of operations once an earthquake happens. There is sorry, go back to that last slide. Thank you. There is a need for a robust, detailed emergency preparedness plan that's required in 32282. What doesn't really go into detail in the California Education Code what that requirement is. But as you can imagine by this conversation today, we urge you to dive deeper into emergency response and being able to support your students and families and teachers after an earthquake. And components may include evacuation routes, emergency contact information, of course, disaster procedures. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Thank you. Make sure that you're doing preparedness, and that what that means is preparing and pre-staging equipment and supplies. Making sure that you have at least 72 hours worth of supplies to sustain students for 72 hours, and that's from the FEMA guidelines. Regular updates to emergency kits. Things expire, things go bad, people get in, they use stuff. Making sure that you replace those things. Realizing the importance of redundant communication systems. Walkie-talkies, batteries run out. Cell phones, they may not work. Ensuring that you have redundant communications, that there's not just one type of communication system that you're relying on in order to be able to support the proper communication during disasters. And then, of course, recognize the role of technology in enhancing emergency communication. There's a lot of different things people do in order to support the use of technology during disasters. We at the state of California have some things that we'll get into in a later slide. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And then we want to talk about mental health. And after a disaster happens, you're going to need to respond. And part of that response is going to be mental health. Post-disaster counseling and support support for students and staff is extremely important. California Education Code 3228 it talks about prioritizing mental health services during earthquakes. Schools and their relationship with disasters has been recognized by the Federal Department of Education as violence. And so that trauma that's caused because of the earthquake really brings out an opportunity. If you do have a presidentially declared disaster, you may qualify for what's called Project SERVE. That's Schools Emergency Response to Violence Grant. It's a grant that's available to schools that if there is an earthquake or fire or any natural disaster or any disaster that's a federally declared disaster, you would be able to receive one-time grants money. It's a really easy grant to apply for. Covers soft costs, not hard costs, so you can't purchase equipment or goods, but you can pay for extra staff, increased transport costs, and of course, mental health services can be paid for through this grant. And go ahead and go to the next slide. And then this is our communication system. This is called the Schools Emergency Reporting System. So all those things that we talked about, all the bad stuff happening, the earthquakes, even a fire, a flood, doesn't matter. If there's a disruption to education at a local level, or there's potential impacts to a school structure or a school environment, we want to know about that. How you tell us is through the Schools Emergency Reporting System, or what we call SERS. I'm going to include in the chat a link to our website where we cover a lot of this information. This Schools Emergency Reporting System is a system for communication with the local education agencies. So it's done at a local education agency level. Likely the contact would be your superintendent or someone that they've designated. So what happens during a disaster is that we may request a response from the local education agency to tell us what the impacts are and what kind of damage has been done to the school, or what type of interruption has been occurred at the school campus. If there is no interruption, then the easy answer is nothing. And if it's not, then we go into detail, and there's a few questions on that system that you go in and answer. You'll be prompted by an email, and then it'll tell you how to report. Again, this happens at the local education agency level and usually is done through the superintendent. Schools can also self-report. So if you know you're going to have a closure, make sure you report that information and you record it and report it up to the local education agency, who should be reporting it up to the County Office of Education. That's true with our disaster response structure. And then, of course, we track any gaps, support gaps, or resource needs on the local level. So if you're having a need, hey, we need, a great example would be during COVID-19, we need more masks. Or let's use an earthquake-specific scenario. Let's say that you had damage to your school and you needed the Department of State architect to come out and review the site to make sure it's safe. Well, that would be a resource you need, because you would need to have the state send somebody down to be able to look at the school and ensure that it's okay to operate. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And that leaves us to our contact information. Feel free to reach out to me or to Joe. You have our general emergency services inbox there. We're free to answer questions, to be able to provide resources. I encourage you to click on that link, check the site out. There's plenty of information and resources on there, especially right now. Earthquakes is really top of mind. You have the Southern California Catastrophic Earthquake Plan that should be released soon, if it hasn't already. And that's a great resource to tell you about what the response is for the state of California for earthquakes. So with that, yield the floor, ready to answer any questions that anyone may have.
Thank you very much, Jake. We do have a question from Matt. Just to clarify, after an earthquake, the state will send an architect or engineer out to assess damage.
Yeah, it's a good question, Matt. And the answer is, what will happen, let's say an earthquake happens, immediately what your county is going to want to do is they're going to want to gather what are called their damage assessments. Damage assessments is determining the level of damage that has happened because of the incident. That information is all gathered together and then sent up to the state. Specifically for schools, however, if you feel like there's damage to your school, because schools are very specific in the way that they are they have construction and the way that the amount of safety that's required to keep them open. We do recommend that if there is damage, that you do have the Department of State architect come down and assess the school site for safety. Also opens up the opportunity for you to get, maybe there might be some school hardship funding, right, through the Office of Public School Construction that may be able to help pay for some of the damages that get fixed that your insurance will not cover. Hopefully that answers your question. Any other questions?
Matt said thank you. Yes, any other questions before we continue?
Now's your chance. Take your shot at me. You can even do comments. You want to, how shiny my head is today. Look at this thing. It's very shiny today.
Okay, and if you do think of questions, you can still add them. We will have a time at the end to return. And including the update to your last name, which I had spelled wrong on the slide. Sorry about that.
That's fine.
Here's another, are any of these resources available to Catholic schools, or are they just for public schools?
Very good question, Jacqueline. And so right now as far as public schools are concerned on the local level, first of all, let me answer the question this way. Are our resources available to public schools? Absolutely. We want to help public schools just as much as we want to help private schools as much as we want to help public schools. It's still kids going to school somewhere. And so as long as kids are going to school, we want them to be safe, regardless of whether that's at a public or a private school. So will we help you? Absolutely. Now, the way that public funds are distributed during a disaster is different to a private entity versus a public entity. So there may be some things that may not be available to you, but still, things like public assistance, absolutely, schools can file for public assistance. Or private schools can apply for public assistance. And we have in the past helped schools that have suffered damages because of a natural disaster, help them get the resources they need. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, Jake. And I see that Noel from Cal OES may be writing a response to that further too. So you can look for that in the Q&A. Okay. We will continue on. Thank you again, Jake. And next up, it's going to be me talking about some of the resources we have through ShakeOut and the Earthquake Country Alliance for Schools. Hopefully none of you are new or haven't heard about the ShakeOut. It started back in 2008 in Southern California as a one-time event. But because of interest, not only in Southern California, but then in Northern California, went statewide in 2009, and then interest from other states and even other countries has grown to what it is today. And of course, you can go to shakeout.org in general or shakeout.org/California to learn more. A little background though, of course, earthquake drills have been happening in California for decades and been required, as I believe Jake mentioned, it's required in the code to do the earthquake drills. And many of you do earthquake drills multiple times during the year. That didn't change with ShakeOut. What really changed was trying to have as many schools to have the drills on the same day to inspire all the other organizations and businesses and community groups and nonprofits to have earthquake drills who really weren't in the way that schools do. So schools have always led ShakeOut, whether it's in California or wherever, in terms of participation, and really to have it be something big enough that others are seeing as wanting to be a part of it. So it was really about shifting the culture of earthquakes and preparedness. We had social science researchers telling us, when to motivate preparedness activity, you have a few ways of doing that. And a lot of that is, of course, related to the culture of what people are thinking about earthquakes, But the number one reason why people get prepared for earthquakes is earthquakes happen, and then they get prepared, and it's like backwards. And so we said, how do we kind of get around that and create something really big, in a kind of a fake quake sense that we can all imagine? And it was based on a big earthquake study done on the southern San Andreas, originally called the ShakeOut scenario. And the social scientists said, well, better than having an earthquake, or we don't want that as much. But what if we could get people seeing each other talking, or seeing each other taking actions for preparedness is one of the factors that, after studying for many years why people got prepared, they said is a factor. People see each other taking action. The other is getting people talking about the disaster and how they're getting prepared. And of course, both of those happen when an earthquake happens. So earthquake happens, people start getting prepared, people are seeing each other getting prepared, they're talking about the earthquake. So it's all related, but we can create something that people can be talking and seeing actions without the earthquake even better. And so that's a lot of what was put into shifting the culture. And even the registration system that we have is designed so that people can see other people participating. You can be listed on the website, and schools again have led this aspect for many, many years. We know of parents that go and make sure that their school is registered or their district is registered, and even other schools and districts have seen the participation and then want to be listed as well, both public and private schools. And so also by registering directly, you'll get the information sent to you that we send out 4 or 5 times each year leading up to ShakeOut, in terms of new kind of newsletters emailed out with resources, and especially new things that are coming out. And you can register at the district level and have one registration, and that would have one person getting that information. Make sure if that's how you're handling your district's registration, make sure you're sharing those resources to your individual school preparedness leaders. But they can also register at the school level. We have a way of making sure that we're not double counting. And so we encourage individual schools to register too. We sometimes have individual classrooms at schools, teachers who are really eager to be involved, and that's fine as well. Okay, and then of course, what we're really looking to do is increase earthquake resilience through the participation in the earthquake drill, not just the drop, cover, hold on, and other ways of protecting yourself during an earthquake, but encouraging people to take actions prior to the earthquake to reduce the potential for loss, damage, injury, etc. And that's where our 7 steps to earthquake safety really come in, what to do before, during, and after. And all of this as important in the home as it is in the school and other businesses and organizations. And again, we do have the information in many languages that you can use on as needed in your school environment, but also to send home to families that may speak other languages. And ultimately, a goal is, of course, to have people practice earthquake safety. And this is a collage of pictures of varieties of different types of ShakeOut drills in a business where they've made their own T-shirts. I know it's too small to see. They've made T-shirts that say "shaken, not stirred," and have a whole bunch of martini glass. This is at a church where they are practicing what to do during when they're having a service. Preschools, CERT teams across the state, and businesses and hospitals, and many organizations participate. Of course, we're practicing what to do, the guidance that has been in place for decades. You may have thought this is somewhat more new, but it's really been since the 80s. We've been talking about making yourself a small target from earthquake injury, from things falling or flying, by dropping down to the ground, covering your head and neck, holding on to if you're underneath something. And this is actually a picture from a school in April 2010. Actually was an earthquake on Easter Sunday. So of course, no one was at the school. There was an earthquake just south of the border. This was a school in California, in Calexico, right across the border. And you can see that this is typical of many schools, many businesses and other organizations where you have the drop ceilings and the ceiling tiles that can fall down, even the metal straps that can fall down. And if the students or others had gotten under desks, they would not have been hit by the items that were falling. They would not be standing when these things fall and the metal straps come down too. And so it's really about protecting yourself from those falling or even flying items. We don't recommend that you run outside because things fall off buildings long before the buildings themselves fall down. Buildings collapsing is fairly rare in California. It can happen, but if you look at the Northridge earthquake, you had buildings that collapsed for sure, and and maybe hundreds or so that had some partial collapse. We had tens of thousands of buildings and offices and homes and school rooms and such that didn't have any building issue, but may have looked like this. And so it's really, for the most part, what you're going to do to protect yourself. So you're going, and also if you can't get down and back up again, we want to make sure you understand you can adapt this to your particular situation, and also in many different locations. But for people with disabilities and functional access needs, you can find a lot of guidance on our webpage at earthquakecountry.org/accessibility. And I'm going to go over each of these. So what we're saying is in most places, you're going to drop on your hands and knees where you are. You're not running down the hall to some other room where you can get under some great table. It really is where you are. In most times, you won't really have notice that when the strongest shaking is going to start. So we don't want you to, even during the shaking, be moving. We want you to drop right where you are. And then cover your head and neck with one arm and hand, and you want to try to get your elbow up as high as you can, your hand over your neck. That's good. And then if you can, just really be on your knees bent over as you're protecting your vital organs. Again, making yourself a smaller target. And if you can, if there is a table or desk nearby that you can crawl and get under, do that. But that's the extent of trying to move to get somewhere, just like really close by. If there's no table or desk, you can crawl against a wall or maybe next to low furniture. You're protecting yourself from things coming from multiple directions. And then hold on to your shelter if you're near or under something, and be ready to move with it. If it's moving around, hold on to your neck. If you're not under something, then use both of your hands and arms. The basic guidance. Now, we have some videos that show this in different situations on our webpage at shakeout.org/messaging. Lots of great guidance there, by the way. That's kind of for the people who are the communicators about their drills. And also on YouTube at youtube.com/greatshakeout. So you can see our videos about what to do if there is a table nearby or if not. But then we also have this is a video that's going to repeat of someone who's using a cane and bringing that cane along with them to make sure they can use that to get back up again. Again, he's made the call that he could get back up on his own, so he's going ahead and protecting himself under that table. If you are someone who uses a wheelchair, make sure, or know someone who does, make sure they know to lock their wheel or turn off the power if it's a power chair so that it won't move around during the shaking. Lean forward as possible, cover your head with something if you have it, or just, again, your arms and hands and arms. And then also if someone's using a walker, and you might think, well, at a school, this is not so common, but maybe it is. And maybe you have guests, or maybe you have, all the situations that just, it's all one version of making yourself a small target, covering yourself as much as you can. And really that can be, may not be able to get your hands up all the way in that, do as best as you can. And then if you're in bed, you want to turn over and this is going to repeat, lay ideally face down. If in bed, put a pillow over your head is the way to remember that. And this is a little clip of a longer video. Each of these is a clip of a longer video, so do watch the full thing. This video also shows that she has what we call an under bed bag next to the bed, and tied to the beds with shoes and socks and flashlight, and maybe glasses and other items needed, so that you're not walking in broken glass if the earthquake happens at night when you likely don't have shoes on. First thing to do, put your shoes on. Make sure they're in a closed bag so that the shoes themselves don't get glass in them. And when you put them on, you discover that. Okay, and that the information about the under bed bag you can find on our website at the step 3, the supplies part, earthquakecountry.org/supplies. Now, when should you protect yourself? Of course, when you feel earthquake shaking, immediately drop cover, hold on, lock cover, hold on, turn over in bed, all the different situations. And we do have others there. What if you're in a theater, you're driving, etc., on our website, earthquakecountry.org/step 5. Now, but there's also a time where even before the shaking begins, you might protect yourself. And that's when you get an earthquake early warning. And then, of course, this needs to be updated. But in 2023, on October 19th, of course, when you do an earthquake drill, you're practicing protecting yourself. So earthquake early warning has been in place now in California for a few years. You may not have had a warning yet, depending on where you're located. It may, because it's not sending you a warning of every earthquake that happens everywhere in the state. It's sending it to you when you need it. And the system will detect that an earthquake has begun, and that it may be very quickly, the sensors across the state are receiving the shaking in that region where it's beginning, sending a signal ahead to an earthquake alert center, and like at Berkeley or Caltech. And the information is very quickly determined. Okay, is this going to be a big earthquake that we should be warning people about, or even a moderate earthquake, or not? And where are the people that are going to be feeling shaking at a certain level? And so that information that gets sent out with the alert is only sent to those people who are going to be experiencing shaking above a certain threshold of certain intensity of shaking. And there's a scale of that intensity, and it's not the most intense. It's kind of where you're going to feel shaking, and you probably should take some action. And then someday it may be where you really should take some action. It's not going to tell you how big of an earthquake is coming. It's just going to tell you should drop cover, hold on, expect shaking, and really take action. There's a couple ways to get the messaging. You can get it through like the what's called wireless emergency alert, like getting an Amber Alert, and that's a larger earthquake, magnitude 5 or greater level of intensity that everybody might get. You can also get it for a lower level earthquake, like a magnitude 4.5 or greater, and a bit lower intensity, if you have the MyShake app that was mentioned in the video. MyShake app you can get through your app store online and download that, and it is from Berkeley. And it will not only display it or have a sound and display text on the screen, it will speak earthquake, expect shaking, drop cover, hold on. So even if you're away from your phone, you'll know what that message is about, versus with the wireless emergency alert. You'll hear a sound, but you'll need to look to see what it was for. And then some Android phones have the system built in. You can learn all about this at earthquake.ca.gov. So really important, and your students in your classrooms may start having this too. So make sure you understand it, and that their phones may start going off, your teachers. There are going to be ways coming where you can have this, and some schools are starting to have this already, where you can have this tied to your PA system, so that is automatically generating the alert in your school, so that everyone is notified at the same time. And other ways that automated kind of systems are going to be implemented. We also have, during COVID, we created some guidance for how to do virtual or kind of remote drills. These remain useful even for in-person drills, and you can find these on our resources pages. So teachers could use this in the classroom to kind of introduce why we're going to do drop cover, hold on. And to do that, it has an audio recording that's kind of a narration for the drill. Depends on what your school does. Some will use this over the PA system as well. Okay, lots of resources we have on the ShakeOut website that you can find. And also for schools at shakeout.org/schools. So definitely go look for there what's been created for various aspects of school earthquake safety, both for planning and preparedness, for leading drills, drill manuals, drill guide, very kind of comprehensive drill guidance. Again, your district and school may already have such plans. If not, you can look for this. Also links to the Readiness and Emergency Management for Schools Technical Assistance Center, REMS-TA Center. Lots of fantastic guidance there that we worked together with the U.S. Department of Education to create the page that they have there. If you're not aware, we also have supported the development of materials for children, younger children, ages 4 through 9, through the Rockets Earthquake Safety Adventure book and Earthquake Safety Activity book. We have videos. They now even have a way that, and you can reach out to me if you're interested in this, for a classroom where you can have a live interaction with the rocket character talking to your children about earthquake safety and other topics in a live video where the animation is synced to their voice, and the children can ask questions, and it's a live interaction. It's really great. So learn more at rocketrules.org/earthquake. Reach out to me if you're interested. You'll see my email coming up. So as far as my part here, complete again, the webinar will be at the website shown on the screen here, earthquakecountry.org/DSWW, Disaster Service Worker Webinar. And you're about to, once we complete here, we're going to put you into a short survey. So I've answered the question about the presentation there, and thank you, Fawad, about your comments. I want to just show this slide. Any other questions, ask now, please, and we'll either in the Q&A or you can put it right in the chat. Reach out to us at info@earthquakecountry.org if you need any further guidance, as well as the links that have been, and email addresses that have been put in the chat. Okay, it's 11 and we are going to complete, and just some comments there in the chat from Cal OES. And okay, thank you all for joining. Have a great rest of your day.